Chosen one. You are here by divine appointment, not coincidence. Heaven has aligned this moment because your spirit is standing at the edge of a supernatural shift. What you are about to hear is not just insight about your mother, but a revelation that unlocks your next level, your healing, and even your divine wealth transfer. Anointed One. God is touching the places in you that have been overlooked, misunderstood, or buried for years. This is your Kairos moment, the turning of the page. Let your heart open, let your spirit rise, because what comes next is the beginning of your breakthrough. Chosen One. Before we go any further, I need you to understand this with your whole being. Nothing about your story has been random. Not the timing, not the pain, not the questions, and certainly not the way you found this message. Heaven has been nudging you, drawing you, aligning you step by step until your spirit arrived right here at the edge of revelation, healing, and divine elevation. And I say this as someone who has walked through shadows of my own, someone who once carried questions that had no language. There were nights when I wondered why the people who were supposed to love me were the ones who couldn't hold me, why affection felt earned instead of offered, why home didn't always feel safe, and why being seen felt dangerous. If that resonates with you, Chosen One, then hear me well. You are not alone in this path, and this path is holy. Your healing journey doesn't begin in the place where everything made sense. It begins in the place where things did not. Many of us were raised by mothers who were carrying storms they never named. Women who were themselves children inside, yet expected to parent. Women who loved in fractured ways, whose capacity was shaped by wounds they never had the chance to heal. And yes, they held us, but they could not always hold space for us. They fed our bodies, but they could not always feed our souls. Their love flickered under the weight of their own unprocessed hurt. And because of that, Chosen One, you adapted. You learned to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You learned to predict moods before voices rose. You learned to survive by being quiet, being careful, being invisible. You learned that needing too much meant risking too much. So you protected yourself the only way a child knew how, by disappearing inside your own life. But even then, even in those early years where love felt conditional, and affection felt unstable, something sacred remained unbroken inside you. A spark the world couldn't touch. A knowing, a whisper, a divine imprint. Because you were not created to survive on scraps of love. You were formed by the one who is love. And that is why the ache inside you has always been larger than your experiences. That is why you longed for something deeper, something safer, something whole. The longing in you was never evidence that something was wrong with you. It was evidence that something higher was calling you. Chosen One. The question, "What's wrong with me?" has lived inside many hearts for years, but it was never your question to carry. You were asking the wrong thing. The question was never, "What's wrong with me?" The question was, "What broke them, and why did I believe it was my responsibility to fix it?" And let me speak this prophetically over you. You were never sent to rescue your mother. You were sent to reveal redemption. Some of the most powerful chosen ones on earth were raised in houses where tenderness was rare and emotional safety wasn't guaranteed. This doesn't disqualify you, it marks you. It shapes you for purpose. Heaven often hides its strongest warriors in the most unlikely beginnings. Because when you've grown up learning how to sense danger, how to read emotional currents, how to soothe pain that isn't yours, you unknowingly develop spiritual discernment that becomes a supernatural weapon. I've seen it in my own life. The very instincts that once kept me silent became the same instincts God used to teach me how to hear Him, how to read rooms, how to protect others, how to see beyond the surface. What the world called trauma response, heaven called training ground, and chosen. One, the same is true for you. You weren't abandoned. You were apprenticed by fire. And hear this, heaven did not overlook your tears. Every quiet ache, every lonely night, every moment you wished she could see you, heaven saw. Heaven recorded. Heaven remembered. And heaven has been preparing restoration for you long before you even knew you needed it. This is why you've always felt different from those around you. This is why you've always carried a sensitivity that others didn't understand. This is why you've always been drawn to healing truth and deeper meaning, because your calling was forged in the very environment that tried to silence it. But now, Anointed One Heaven is shifting your story. You are stepping into a moment where the past no longer shapes your identity, it shapes your authority. The wounds that once weakened you are becoming the wisdom that strengthens you. What was meant to break you is becoming the foundation God builds purpose on. And yes, this process feels uncomfortable. It feels like the ground is shifting under your feet. But that's the sign that transformation is happening. You are no longer wrestling with your past. You are wrestling with the version of yourself that learned to survive it. You are being invited into a higher identity, a truer identity, one heaven has called you into since the beginning. And chosen one, before we move deeper, before we uncover the layers of your story and the blueprint of your healing, I need you to pause and receive this truth. You are not here to carry the pain that raised you. You are here to transcend it. Now take a breath. Let that settle. Because where we're about to go next will shift the way you see your past forever. Chosen one, as we step deeper into this journey, I want you to understand something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Healing does not begin when the past stops hurting. Healing begins when you finally acknowledge how the past has continued to speak inside you long after the moments themselves have ended. The loudest wounds are rarely the ones that happened out loud. They are the ones that echo in silence. Many chosen ones grow into adulthood, believing they have moved on simply because they have grown older, moved out, or built a life of their own. But age does not silence an internalized mother. Time does not erase emotional programming. Distance does not end patterns that were written into your nervous system when you were too young to understand what was being done to you. And that is why this part of your healing feels so sacred, so personal, and so painfully precise. You are no longer confronting your mother. You are confronting the version of yourself that was shaped by her unhealed wounds. This is where healing becomes spiritual. This is where healing becomes prophetic. And this is where heaven begins rearranging your identity from the inside out. Chosen one. The truth is, this your mother may have stopped speaking years ago, but her voice continued living in you. It became the whisper that told you not to ask for too much. It became the caution that told you joy was unsafe. It became the pressure that told you to shrink yourself so others wouldn't feel threatened. It became the fear that told you to stay quiet, to keep the peace. These were not conscious choices, they were survival responses born in a house where emotional stillness often felt safer than emotional honesty. And yet even in those moments when you silenced your own needs, something in your spirit refused to die. It stayed awake. It stayed alert. It stayed sensitive. That sensitivity is not weakness. It is the mark of someone heaven has been shaping since the beginning. You learned how to sense shifts in the atmosphere. You learned how to read the emotional climate of a room before a word was spoken. You learned discernment long before you even knew the word for it. What felt like fear then is becoming spiritual intuition now. What felt like hypervigilance then is becoming prophetic sight. Now, this is why your calling feels heavy. This is why your emotions run deep. This is why your empathy seems stronger than those around you. You weren't too emotional. You were spiritually wired. You were being trained in ways you didn't understand. And now, heaven is turning what once felt like burden into supernatural ability. But before you rise into that higher identity, you must confront the internal vows that kept you tied to an old version of yourself. Every chosen one eventually discovers these hidden vows, the silent agreements made in childhood. Agreements like, I won't be happier than she was. I won't outgrow the story she stayed trapped in. If I shine too brightly, she will feel small. If I become whole, I will leave her behind. If I heal, it will expose her wounds. Chosen one. These agreements were never love, they were survival, and survival is not your destiny. There was a season in my own life when I feared joy, not because joy was unavailable, but because joy felt dangerous, like stepping outside a boundary that had been etched into my soul. I believed that rising above the pain of my upbringing meant abandoning the ones who shaped me, so I dimmed myself. I kept myself half-healed, half-present, half-alive, and in one of the quietest moments of prayer, God whispered something that dismantled years of emotional bondage. Your joy does not dishonor them. Your joy redeems them. Those words broke something open in me, the lie that becoming more was a betrayal, the lie that healing created distance, the lie that freedom meant disloyalty. And chosen one, I speak this over you with the same divine authority. You were never meant to repeat your mother's story. You were meant to transcend it. Your healing does not erase her. Your healing elevates her. Your healing does what she could not finish. Your healing ends what she could not break. Your healing becomes the redemption your bloodline has been waiting for. The enemy wants you to believe that becoming whole makes you ungrateful. But heaven says the opposite. Becoming whole is how you honor the ones who came before you. You are not here to live as a restrained version of yourself, to protect the memory of someone who never learned how to be free. You are here to embody the freedom they never had the tools to reach. And this is where the divine shift begins. When you stop seeing yourself as an extension of your mother's pain and start seeing yourself as an extension of God's promise, everything changes. Your identity changes. Your emotions change. Your expectations change. Your vision changes. Suddenly the limitations you once accepted begin to feel foreign. The guilt you carried begins to fall away. The silence you once used for protection no longer fits the person you are becoming. Chosen one. This is your turning point. This is where the internal war begins to lose its power. This is where heaven starts rewriting the script from the inside. This is where you stop living to avoid someone else's disappointment and start living to fulfill God's assignment. Take a breath. Let this truth settle into the deepest parts of you. You are not becoming your mother. You are becoming who God always intended you to be. Chosen one. Healing becomes truly transformative the moment you understand that the wounds you carry are no longer simply memories. From childhood, they have become internal architectures, shaping how you think, feel, and move through the world. What once happened around you has been happening inside you for years, and this is where the real work begins. Not at the surface of your story, but at the roots. For many who grew up under the shadow of a mother wounded by her own history, the emotional inheritance passed down was not tenderness, but tension, not safety, but survival. A child absorbs what a mother never learned how to name. You absorbed her silence. You absorbed her fear. You absorbed her shame. And in the process, you began building an inner world designed not for living, but for enduring. But chosen one, the identity that helped you endure, is not the identity that will help you rise. This is the sacred dilemma of every soul marked by heaven, yet shaped by human imperfection. You were born into a story you did not choose, raised under emotional weather you could not control, and trained in reactions that were never meant to become your permanent nature. Yet for years, the voice inside you did not belong to you. It belonged to the patterns you inherited. It is the voice that whispers, "Ask for nothing." The voice that warns joy is unsafe. The voice that insists, "Do not outshine her." The voice that fears, "If you thrive, you will lose love." That voice is not the Holy Spirit. It is the residue of survival, and survival, though once necessary, becomes suffocating when your spirit is ready to ascend. Healing at this level demands honesty, not about your mother, but about yourself, about the ways you learned to disappear so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed, about the joy you dimmed so she wouldn't feel small, about the dreams you delayed because you believed they would distance you from her, about the worthiness you questioned because she could not affirm what she had never received. This is the unseen cost of childhood shaped by unhealed mothers, the lingering belief that love must be earned, deserved, or negotiated. But here is the truth. Heaven is speaking to you now. You did not become your mother. You became the child who learned how to survive her pain. And now, God is inviting you to become something entirely different, the healed adult she never had the chance to become. This is the precise moment where healing shifts from emotional reflection to spiritual transformation. God begins to dismantle the reflexes you thought were personality traits. He exposes the fear you thought was humility, the silence you mistook for peace, the guilt you confused with loyalty. He coaxes the younger version of you to loosen her grip and let your spirit lead. I remember experiencing this shift myself. There was a moment, subtle, unexpected, when I realized I was afraid of joy. Not because joy was unavailable, but because joy felt disloyal, almost dangerous, as if exceeding the emotional ceiling of my upbringing would somehow betray the people who raised me. It took me years to understand this one truth. We often remain half-healed out of respect for the people who loved us only to the level of their capacity. And in that quiet moment of prayer, God whispered something that broke a chain inside me. Your joy does not dishonor her. Your joy redeems her. Chosen one. Your mother's unfinished story is not yours to finish by staying small. Your healing does not erase her, it elevates her. Your growth does not betray her, it breaks what broke her. Your freedom does not abandon her, it completes what she never had the strength to complete. This is why the emotional tug-of-war inside you has felt so intense. You are being pulled between two worlds, the world you were born into and the world you are called to build. The child in you wants to protect her, the adult in you wants to rise, and God is calling you to do both in the only way that truly honors her, by refusing to repeat her pain. Every chosen one eventually reaches a turning point where they must choose, will I carry the weight of her wounds, or will I carry the promise God placed on my life? This choice is not about judgment, it is about liberation for both of you. Because when you heal, you do not heal from your mother, you heal for your mother. You become the life her pain could not produce. You become the clarity her confusion could not reach. You become the wholeness her brokenness could not find. You become the answered prayer she never knew how to pray. And the moment you embrace this truth, the shame that has followed you begins to loosen. The guilt that has stalked your joy begins to weaken. The voice that demanded smallness begins to fade. In its place rises a steadier voice, gentle, quiet, unmistakable, the voice of your Creator, reminding you that you were always meant to rise. Chosen one, healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming who you were before the world touched you, and you are beginning to remember. Chosen one. There comes a moment in every healing journey when the past stops appearing as a distant memory and begins rising within you as a quiet but undeniable weight. It is in this moment that the process of healing shifts from understanding into release, from recalling into surrender, from survival into transformation. Many chosen ones begin to realize that the burdens they have carried for years were never theirs to hold in the first place. You carried your mother's emotions, her silence, her sorrow, and her storms as if they belonged to you. And for a long time, you believed this was love. But this moment marks the beginning of clarity, the understanding that what once protected you is now what needs to be undone. For so long you were shaped by roles you never chose. You became the peacekeeper, the emotional interpreter, the invisible stabilizer of a home that demanded more from you than any child should ever give. You learned to monitor moods before words were spoken, to silence yourself so others would not become louder, and to dim your light so her shadows would not grow larger. You lived in emotional hyper-awareness, believing that if you could be perfect enough, quiet enough, or helpful enough, you could somehow earn the love you never fully received. But healing asks you to examine these patterns not with blame, but with truth. You were never meant to become your mother's shield, her comfort, her unspoken remedy. You were meant to be her child. And this truth, as painful as it is, becomes the doorway into emotional liberation. When you realize that love never required you to disappear, something inside finally wakes up. The guilt you carried for wanting happiness begins to loosen. The fear of becoming more than she was starts to dissolve. You begin to see that shrinking yourself was not devotion, it was survival, and God is now calling you out of survival and into identity. This shift is uncomfortable because for the first time you must confront the emotional vows formed in childhood. The vow not to outgrow her, not to shine too brightly, not to be too joyful or too free. These vows, created in innocence, became chains that bound your spirit. Healing is the breaking of those chains. I remember a moment in my own journey when I realized I was afraid to feel joy because joy felt like betrayal. I believed that rising meant abandoning the people I loved. But God whispered something that changed the trajectory of my healing. Your healing does not dishonor her. Your healing frees her legacy. This truth is what I now speak over you. Becoming whole does not mean rejecting your mother. It means refusing to inherit her wounds. It means choosing to be the turning point in your bloodline. It means allowing God to restore what trauma rewrote. As you walk deeper into healing, memories may rise and emotions may surge, not to break you, but to free you. This is not regression, this is deliverance. What you are feeling is the release of years of silence, restraint, and emotional labor. It is your soul exhaling for the first time in decades. When grief rises, it does not come to drown you. It comes to clear the space for joy. When sorrow surfaces, it does not come to steal your peace. It comes to return the parts of yourself you abandoned. This is the holy unraveling, the sacred work of God, pulling you out of what never belonged to you. And in this unraveling, you will meet a version of yourself you have not seen in years, a you who breathes without fear, A you who speaks without trembling, a you who shines without apology, a you who no longer mistakes emotional exhaustion for love. This version of you is not new. This is the you that existed before survival reshaped you, the you God always intended to restore. Chosen one, this is the moment where you say, "This ends with me," not in bitterness, but in wisdom, not in rebellion, but in resurrection, not in rejection, but in revelation. Your healing becomes the turning point in your lineage. Your wholeness becomes the prayer your ancestors never knew how to pray. Your freedom becomes evidence that God has placed a mantle on your life, a mantle to break cycles, not continue them. You are allowed to rise beyond your mother's emotional ceiling. You are allowed to experience joy without guilt. You are allowed to build a peaceful life, even if she never found hers. You are allowed to step into wholeness she could not reach. Your healing is not betrayal. Your healing is the redemption of your bloodline. And now, as this truth anchors deeper into your spirit, your journey begins to shift from undoing the past to becoming the future. There comes a moment, chosen one, when the very atmosphere around your life begins to shift in ways you can no longer ignore. It's subtle at first, almost like a soft internal pull, a quiet invitation to listen, breathe, and slow down. But then it grows stronger until the message becomes undeniable. Heaven is guiding you away from the noise. Every part of your being begins to withdraw from what once felt familiar. The conversations that used to entertain you start to feel shallow. The environments that once energized you now leave you drained in ways you cannot explain. You try to shake it off. You try to keep up. But something in your spirit whispers, "Not here, not anymore." This is not emotional burnout. This is spiritual relocation. It is the beginning of a divine separation, orchestrated not by your logic, but by your destiny. What you call discomfort is actually alignment. What you call confusion is actually clarity rising. Your body and spirit are simply adjusting to a higher frequency. The separation feels unfamiliar, even painful at times, because it requires releasing versions of yourself you worked so hard to build. But chosen one, the truth is that you have outgrown the life that was built on survival. You are stepping into the life that was designed for purpose. In this season, relationships shift quietly. People you once confided in now feel distant. Those who used to understand you no longer understand your silence or your sudden need for space. But this is not rejection. This is refinement. Heaven is pruning your connections not to isolate you, but to protect the seed inside you. What God placed within you cannot be mishandled. Even your hesitation to explain yourself is divine. Not everyone has the capacity to interpret your evolution, and not everyone should. Growth often looks like retreat to those who remain unchanged. Chosen one, you may feel the ache of separation, the slow unraveling of familiarity, and the grief of letting go. But this grief is sacred. It is the kind of grief that accompanies transformation, not loss. It is the feeling of your spirit shedding old layers, old patterns, old attachments that can no longer coexist with your calling. You are not moving away from people out of pride. You are moving toward destiny out of obedience. Those who walk with you in the next season must be aligned in spirit, not just connected in history. As you follow the pull inward, your inner world becomes louder. You begin to hear thoughts you once ignored, desires you once buried, truths you once silenced for the sake of peace. Suddenly, your own voice becomes a revelation. You realize how much of yourself you withheld just to maintain relationships that were never meant to survive your elevation. The separation hurts, yes, but the clarity it births is priceless. You begin to see who was connected to your soul and who was merely connected to your presence. And slowly, the fear of being alone transforms into the beauty of being aligned. Your home becomes your sanctuary again. Your breath becomes your prayer. Your thoughts become your offering. In quiet places, you begin to meet the version of yourself that you prayed for, the version that is no longer shaped by others' expectations, but by God's intention. The version that doesn't need to shrink to fit into rooms that were too small for your spirit. The version that carries peace so deeply that chaos can no longer enter unnoticed. Chosen one. Everything around you is being rearranged so your inner world can rise. This shift is not random. It is preparation for a divine assignment that requires focus, sensitivity, and purity of spirit. Heaven cannot position you publicly until you are stabilized privately. And stability comes through silence, surrender, and separation. That is why God is pulling you back. Not to hide you, but to shape you without interference. You are being rebuilt from the inside out. There will be moments when your heart longs for what you left behind, moments when memories resurface with warmth, and moments when solitude feels heavier than expected. But even in those moments, something deeper holds you, a knowing that you are being guided. The hand of God is on your shoulder, steady and unwavering. Your spirit knows what your emotions cannot yet articulate. What you are becoming requires this distance. In this sacred space, you will notice the emergence of a new kind of strength. Not the strength that pushes through exhaustion or forces itself to be okay, but the strength that comes from stillness. The strength that comes from letting God speak first. The strength that comes from no longer rushing the process. You are learning how to honor divine timing instead of chasing human deadlines. You are learning how to love yourself without losing yourself. You are learning that peace is not passive, it is prophetic. And as the days pass, you will begin to see glimpses of the new path forming beneath your feet. Subtle alignments, unexpected confirmations, a shift in your desires, a new capacity to hear. A new hunger for truth, a sharpened sensitivity to what drains you and what feeds you. These are signs that the separation is working. You are becoming spiritually lighter so you can carry something heavier, something holy. Chosen one. You are not walking away from life. You are walking toward your assignment. The separation is not a detour, it is the doorway. And though the path feels narrow, it is filled with glory. You are being prepared to step into spaces your old self could not enter. You are being readied to speak words your old voice could not hold. You are being refined to carry a mantle your old identity could not support. Take heart. This separation is not your ending. It is your becoming. And what waits on the other side is nothing less than the life heaven ordained for you long before your first breath. Chosen one. There comes a point in your healing journey when the battlefield is no longer the environment you grew up in, but the landscape of your own mind. The old voices, the lingering fears, the inherited patterns, they don't disappear simply because you have grown older. They linger like shadows appearing in moments when your guard is down, whispering stories that no longer belong to you. And yet something inside you knows those stories are losing their power. Something inside you knows the war is shifting because you are shifting. Healing is no longer an abstract idea. It is becoming the way you breathe, the way you choose, the way you rise. As you walk deeper into this transformation, you begin to notice how differently you respond to the world. The triggers that once sent you spiraling now feel like echoes you can observe without falling into. The wounds that once dictated your relationships now feel like reminders of how far you've come. This is the hidden evidence of your internal resurrection. You are not who you used to be. The world may not see it immediately, but heaven does. The spiritual realm responds to every quiet step you take toward freedom, every boundary you set, every moment you choose peace over chaos. These choices become declarations. I am not who pain tried to make me. I belong to purpose. But chosen one. There is another layer one that many overlook. Healing requires confronting not just what was done to you, but what you learned to do to yourself in order to survive. You learned to silence your needs. You learned to shrink your presence. You learned to apologize for existing. These habits take time to undo because they were formed in environments where protection meant invisibility. Now, as God expands you, invisibility becomes a barrier instead of a shield. Your light is no longer optional. Your voice is no longer negotiable. Your worth is no longer conditional. And learning to believe that requires patience with the parts of you that are still afraid. There will be days when you feel strong enough to rewrite your entire story, and days when the weight of old patterns feels heavier than usual. Both days are holy. Both days are part of the unfolding. Healing is not linear. It is layered. It is cyclical. It is sacred. You are peeling back years of emotional sediment that was never yours to carry. You are releasing narratives that were written by broken people trying to survive their own storms. This shedding is not a sign of weakness. It is proof that your spirit refuses to remain trapped in outdated identities. Chosen one, as this healing deepens, you will also notice an unexpected shift gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain, but gratitude for the clarity it produced. Gratitude for the strength you never knew you had. Gratitude for the depth of empathy that now allows you to see others with spiritual eyes. Gratitude for the compassion that flows from you like a quiet river, healing others simply by your presence. Pain did not make you bitter. It made you expansive. It made you capable of carrying a level of love that could not have been formed in comfort. It made you someone heaven can trust. As this gratitude grows, so does your capacity for surrender. You begin to release the need for explanations, apologies, or closure. You begin to accept that not all wounds are meant to be justified by the one who caused them. Some wounds are meant to be redeemed by the one who heals them. Surrender becomes your new strength. You stop forcing relationships that drain you. You stop chasing validation that was never yours to earn. You stop negotiating your worth with people who cannot see you clearly. Instead, you align yourself with what is true, what is divine, what is eternal. And in that alignment, something powerful begins to happen. Your life starts to harmonize with heaven's rhythm. Suddenly, opportunities that once felt out of reach begin to approach you. Peace becomes more natural than anxiety. Love becomes safer than fear. Purpose becomes louder than pain. You begin to feel a supernatural ease surrounding your steps, like the weight you carried for years has finally been lifted. This ease is not accidental. It is the result of internal alignment, the result of your willingness to confront, release, and rise. It is evidence that heaven rewards every courageous step taken in faith. Chosen one. This season of healing is not simply about repairing your past. It is about preparing your future. You are being shaped into someone who can walk with authority, compassion, and clarity. Someone who can break generational patterns simply by choosing differently. Someone who carries a mantle of restoration that will echo beyond your lifetime. You are becoming the healed ancestor your lineage never had. You are becoming the answered prayer your bloodline did not know how to pray. And though the journey is not done, you are further than you have ever been. Heaven is proud of you. God is walking with you. And your spirit is awakening into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. Chosen one. As your healing deepens, you begin to notice something you never expected. The world around you starts responding to the transformation happening within you. Places that once felt familiar suddenly feel foreign. Conversations you once engaged in now feel empty. Even the people you love begin to sense the shift, though they may not understand it. This is the quiet evidence that your spirit is rising, that the frequency of your life is changing, and that heaven is preparing to usher you into a realm where wounded patterns can no longer follow. In this stage of healing, the most profound changes happen in the unseen. Your mindset begins to expand. Your inner dialogue becomes gentler. You start catching yourself before you fall back into old emotional reflexes. You pause before reacting. You breathe before assuming. You give yourself compassion before criticism. These subtle changes are not small, they are signs of mastery. Signs that your spirit is taking the lead where the wounded child once ruled. Signs that the generational patterns attempting to cling to you are losing their authority. And yet, chosen one, with every step into this new version of yourself, there is a tension you must learn to navigate the space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. This space is sacred, but uncomfortable. You are no longer satisfied with old habits, but you have not fully settled into your new identity either. You are shedding the old skin, but the new skin is still forming. This in-between is where the real spiritual work happens. This is where you learn to trust God without clarity, to walk without confirmation, and to surrender without knowing what comes next. It is in this tension that heaven begins to strengthen you. The more you lean into growth, the more your spiritual senses sharpen. You start seeing people as they truly are beyond their words and into their intentions. You sense spiritual atmospheres before you step into a room. You discern hidden motives without needing explanations. This is not paranoia. This is discernment awakening. This is heaven equipping you so that your next season is not sabotaged by familiar spirits wearing familiar faces. Chosen one, this is also the season where you begin reclaiming your emotional authority. For so long, your mother's wounds, her fears, her survival patterns shaped how you navigated the world. But now you are choosing to rewrite the script. You are choosing to feel without being overwhelmed, to love without losing yourself, and to stand without apologizing. You are learning that strength can be soft, and that softness can be strong. You are learning that healing is not about replacing pain with perfection, but about replacing fear with truth. And here in this unfolding, you will begin to sense a new kind of courage rising within you. A courage that does not roar but rests. A courage that does not demand but knows. A courage that anchors you when old wounds attempt to rise, reminding you, I am not who I was. I am becoming who I was always meant to be. This courage becomes your shield, your compass, your inner witness that the transformation is real. As this courage stabilizes, something deeper happens. You begin to bless yourself. You begin to validate your own journey. You begin to honor your own heart. You stop waiting for permission to heal. You stop waiting for someone else to acknowledge your growth. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. Instead, you become your own confirmation. You become your own turning point. You become the living proof that healing is possible. Chosen one, you are not just healing from your mother, you are healing forward, healing outward, healing upward. You are becoming the healed ancestor. You are becoming the generational interruption. You're becoming the one heaven trusts to rewrite the legacy. And this rising is only the beginning. Chosen one. As you continue stepping into this deeper layer of healing, something profound begins awakening inside you, a clarity that feels both ancient and newly born. You start recognizing that none of your pain was purposeless. The wounds that once felt random now reveal themselves as thresholds. The silence that shaped you was not abandonment, but initiation. And every moment you spent searching for love was preparing you to recognize the love that doesn't fail. Your story begins to make spiritual sense, not because it was easy, but because heaven has been weaving redemption through every fragile thread. In this unfolding, you begin to understand that healing is not simply recovering from what happened, it is remembering who you were before the pain tried to redefine you. It is the sacred act of returning to the self God always intended, the self buried under years of survival silence and emotional inheritance. And as this remembrance rises, you feel an inner widening, a spiritual expansion that signals you are stepping into the life you were always meant to live. You start realizing that you were never meant to fit into the emotional patterns you were raised in. You were meant to transform them. Anointed One, your emotional landscape shifts in ways that surprise you. You notice that the places where you once felt fragile now feel strengthened by understanding. The memories that once overwhelmed you no longer hold the same power. You can acknowledge them without collapsing under them. And perhaps most sacred compassion begins to rise inside you, not the kind that costs your peace, but the kind that comes from freedom. You look at your mother not through the lens of blame, but through the lens of truth. You see her humanity, her wounds, her limitations, and instead of mirroring her pain, you begin breaking free from it. This is where forgiveness transforms from obligation into liberation. Forgiveness does not dismiss what happened, nor does it pretend that your hurt did not matter. Instead, it releases you from carrying what your spirit was never meant to hold. You stop rehearsing the scenes of your past, not because they don't matter, but because you finally matter more. Healing becomes the act of choosing yourself after years of abandoning yourself for others. Chosen One, as this deeper freedom forms within you, a new strength begins to anchor your spirit. You find yourself discerning differently, choosing environments that protect your peace, conversations that nourish your heart, and relationships that honor your growth. You begin to trust the voice of God within you more than the echoes of trauma behind you. You say no without guilt. You rest without fear. You set boundaries without apology. This is not rebellion. This is resurrection. And as your identity stabilizes, heaven responds. New connections emerge, new clarity rises, new opportunities open, as though creation itself has been waiting for you to become this version of you. Doors you once knocked on now open effortlessly because you are no longer approaching them from survival, but from strength. Every step you take confirms that your healing is aligning you with destiny. Finally, Anointed One hope rises steady, mature, unwavering. Not the fragile hope of a child wishing for rescue, but the grounded hope of a healed soul stepping into purpose. Hope that assures you your future will not resemble your past. Hope that whispers you were meant for joy, for peace, for wholeness. Hope that declares your story is shifting from wounds to wisdom. This hope is the sign your healing is becoming your calling. Chosen One, as we come to the close of this message, pause and feel the truth settling into your spirit. You have not been walking through this healing alone. Heaven has been guiding you, shaping you, and preparing you for a season your past could never have imagined. What you faced did not diminish you, it refined you, and now you stand in your Kairos moment, the exact divinely appointed time where old wounds lose their power and a supernatural transfer begins to unfold within your life. Anointed One, you are stepping into a realm where emotional freedom becomes spiritual authority, where clarity becomes protection, where wholeness becomes your inheritance. Heaven is not simply restoring what was taken from you. Heaven is multiplying what you carry. This is the moment where your lineage shifts, where grace rewrites what trauma once claimed, where you rise not as the wounded child, but as the healed vessel God always intended you to be. So walk forward gently, but walk forward boldly. Guard your heart, honor your boundaries, and stay aligned with the voice that has carried you this far. The same God who saw every tear is now opening doors no pain can close. Trust the timing, trust the unfolding, trust the anointing that rests on your life. If this word touched your spirit, chosen one, let it be known in the comments. And if you desire to continue this journey of healing and revelation, you are welcome here. Until next time, stay grounded, stay expectant, and never forget you were always chosen.